Hello, everyone, and welcome to Keep It Classical, and Happy Pride, or Happy Proud Month.
Hi, gay! Happy Pride Month!
Today we're going to talk about classical music and sexuality, specifically about composers who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. Also, I'm kind of upset because I looked for this specific shirt for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then I waited for a couple weeks for it to arrive, and now it's out of frame, but that's that's the shirt. If you're not familiar with the LGBTQ plus acronym and what those letters represent, I've included some resources in the description below where you can learn more about those. Then come back to this video because we're going to talk about how they apply to music, and then I'm going to share 5 LGBTQ plus composers that everyone should know about. So let's get started. Before we proceed, I want to warn you that some of the topics that we'll cover in this video include self-harm and suicide. If you're not at a good headspace right now to talk about those topics, feel free to revisit this video at a future time. Let's begin by saying that every LGBTQ plus person is entitled to come out whenever and however they want. While there are lots of composers who are out and open about their sexuality, there are many others who never came out because it wasn't safe for them. This was mostly due to generations of discrimination, as well as a general fear of loss of income, livelihood, and freedom. The point of this video isn't to try and out individuals against their will, nor is it to gossip about the private lives of anyone else. The point of this video is to merely shed some light on a once very taboo topic that's intricately related to a composer's art. Which begs the question, why bother talking about this? Can music sound gay? Does it make the music more valuable or less valuable? Is this detail about someone's life vital to understanding their music? Let me ask another question. Does knowing someone's national origin help you understand them better as a composer? What about their socioeconomic status or their religion? The short answer is it depends. Being Catholic might not be all that important of a detail if you're an Italian composer in the 16th century, but it's a very important detail if you're a British composer during the 16th century. With that being said, being a queer composer in North America, Western Europe, or East Asia might not be as significant a detail as being a queer composer in those same places 70 years earlier, or being a queer composer today in Russia, Africa, or the Middle East. It's about context. Of all the composers that we know are gay, one of the most famous has to be Pyotr Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky is best known for his ballets like Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and The Nutcracker, as well as his 6 symphonies. We know he was gay from letters that he wrote to his brother about his sexuality. Fun fact, his brother was also gay. Bet his parents were so proud. While Tchaikovsky was celebrated during his life as one of the greatest artists that Russia has ever produced, the motherland has a particularly harsh history with LGBTQ+ individuals, and the late 1800s was particularly so. This harsh treatment continues to this day, and even as recently as 2018, Tchaikovsky's sexuality was either debated, not accepted, or outright censored in Russian music circles. In 1893, only 6 days after conducting the premiere of his 6th symphony, Tchaikovsky mysteriously dies at the age of 53. While many presumed he died of cholera, scholars have argued that in fact Tchaikovsky ended his own life because he was about to be outed as a gay man and was terrified of facing the consequences. Here's an excerpt from one of Tchaikovsky's best-known ballets, Swan Lake. Another one of the most famous gay composers is Francis Poulenc from France. He was born into a wealthy, privileged, and musical family, but lost both his parents by the time he was 18 years old. Unlike Tchaikovsky, Poulenc was pretty fortunate to come of age in Paris during the 1920s, when being gay was largely a non-issue and even celebrated. As a result, his music is flamboyant and colorful and even a little bit mischievous. While Parisian society was largely accepting of his sexuality, what complicated his life was his devout faith to the Roman Catholic Church, which strongly condemns homosexuality. Poulenc describes himself as half monk, half bad boy. Sound like someone you know? As a result, his religious music, while being sincere, has a glittering, cheeky, and at times hedonistic quality to it. He loved images of monks playing soccer. But this conflict between his faith and his sexuality drove him, at one point, to be hospitalized with depression and suicidal tendencies. But this didn't stop him from trying to balance the two in an unapologetic way. Here's an excerpt from his choral orchestral work, Gloria. England has its own share of LGBTQ+ composers like Ethel Smyth, Benjamin Britten, and Michael Tippett. Now, the obvious choice here is to talk about Britten or Tippett, but I don't want to do that. We already talk so much about Britten being gay, let's talk about the L in our acronym for once. Ethel Smyth in many ways was the original female firebrand composer. She moved to Germany to study at the Leipzig Conservatory against her father's wishes. She was heavily involved in the suffrage movement and even spent time in prison for her activism. She was pretty open about being gay, saying in a letter to a male friend, "Why is it so much easier for me to love my own sex passionately than yours?" She also notably had relationships with women like Virginia Woolf and Edith Somerville. Even though she met opposition in her career, and her music was the subject of blatantly sexist reviews, her opera, The Wreckers, was considered to be one of the most important English operas of the early 20th century, and she was the first female composer to be honored with a damehood. Here's an excerpt from Ethel Smyth's opera, The Wreckers.
Often go astray, and there is a little saying
The United States in the 20th century actually had quite a large number of gay composers, including, but not limited to, Aaron Copland, Samuel Barber, along with his partner Giancarlo Menotti, Leonard Bernstein, Pauline Oliveros, Wendy Carlos, and Jennifer Higdon, just to name a few. Despite being gay, a communist, and a Jew, Aaron Copland managed to secure a lasting legacy in American art music, even sometimes being referred to as the father of American music. Copland showed interest in music at a young age and received extensive training, including with Nadia Boulanger in Paris. Now, Boulanger was arguably the most influential composition teacher of the 20th century and had students from all across the world, and famously encouraged those students to embrace the music of their homelands. This seemed to have an effect on Copland because after returning to the United States, he started exploring different aspects from American music. Some of Copland's music is very progressive and pushes the envelope, and other parts of his catalog include arrangements of American folk tunes and sound very folksy and idyllic. When you listen to that part of Copland's music, it's difficult to describe it as anything other than American. Here's an excerpt from his ballet, Rodeo. While Copland accepted that he was gay early in his life and didn't seem to hide the fact that he was gay or dating men, he never really publicly came out. Of this, composer David Del Tredici said, "It's true, he never publicly came out, and that was a loss. He would have been a terrific gay advocate. Even though the most powerful people in music were gay, not one of them came out. They say that gay composers tend to be more tonal and straight composers more atonal. This is not true, but certainly in Menotti, Barber, Copland, and Bernstein, there's something very touching, in tune with feelings, and certainly in dramatic distinction to the more atonal music of Babbitt, Carter, and Sessions. Maybe the alienation which every gay man of every generation has felt does yield another kind of music. I like the image of the grain of sand in the oyster, the irritant that somehow turns into a treasured asset, a pearl." One last composer we should discuss is Jennifer Higdon. Higdon was raised in Georgia and Tennessee before attending Bowling Green State University, where she decided rather late in the game to study flute, performance, and composition. She describes having to play catch-up with her coursework because everyone else in the class had been studying music for much longer than she had. Despite starting late in her studies, she went on to get a doctorate of music from the University of Pennsylvania and teaches at the Curtis Institute of Music. She's written for several major orchestras and was awarded a Pulitzer Prize and even a Grammy Award. What I love most about her story is that Higdon met her wife in high school band class. Higdon has said that nature and the rural landscape of Tennessee has been one of her artistic inspirations. She also embraces an intuitive style of writing rather than seeking to fit into a prescribed form or structure. Here's an excerpt from her composition, Blue Cathedral. There are many, many other LGBTQ plus composers to talk about, so maybe I'll make another video in the future. But I'm glad that we got to talk about these 5 specifically. Another point to consider about why it's important to talk about composers and sexuality is the same reason why we look for any common characteristic in any other human. We want to find something about us in other people. We want to see part of ourselves reflected back at us, and we want to make a human connection through those same characteristics. And in this seeking, representation matters. Is it important that a composer is gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender? We can answer yes, because I am too, and I want to see if I can learn more about myself through their art. We want to find belonging, especially those of us in the LGBTQ plus community, who may have grown up feeling shunned or alienated in some way. For many of us, music has been the only way that we've been able to learn that we belong, or that life is worth living after coming out. Knowing that these composers are like us in some way helps us find a sense of validation and belonging. That's all for now. Make sure to check out the other videos that I posted about classical music history, as well as special subjects in Hidden Masters. Until next time, keep it classical.